the tariffs. You've been hearing about tariffs. We're taking in almost $2 billion a day in tariffs. $2 billion a day. And we're doing very well.
Made products.
Once a Canadian ice hockey hero, now considered a traitor for his support of Trump.
He's proven that he doesn't even respect our country anymore.
Support Canada with Team Canada, and right now that means avoiding American-made products.
Which is when U.S. President Donald Trump has said he could impose 25% tariffs on Canadian goods, and that has some shoppers here thinking twice about what they buy at the grocery store and which brands they are supporting.
No protests, no slogans, no marches filling the streets. Instead, an unsettling quiet has settled across Canadian cities, shopping malls, and even kitchen tables. What once seemed unshakable, the constant presence of American brands in everyday Canadian life, has begun to fade. By early 2025, surveys revealed something striking. Nearly 6 in 10 Canadians were actively avoiding American products. That figure is not the sign of a fringe movement. It is a cultural reset, a deliberate shift in consumer behavior that touches every aspect of daily life. The fallout has been swift and visible. Household names like McDonald's, Walmart, and Amazon, companies once so ingrained in Canadian routines they felt inevitable, are suddenly being pushed aside. The boycott is not confined to shopping carts or storefronts. It has spilled into tourism, into hospitality, into the small but essential arteries of commerce that bind the two neighbors together. Cross-border travel, long a symbol of closeness, has collapsed. In just 6 months, nearly 2 million fewer trips were made by Canadians into the United States. Behind those numbers are an estimated 14,000 jobs lost in hotels, airports, and service industries across America. These were jobs so dependent on Canadian visitors they barely attracted notice before. Now their absence tells a sobering story. This shift is not just about money. It is about trust. When even America's closest ally begins to turn away in silence, the signal to the wider world is clear. If Canada, neighbor, partner, and friend, chooses distance, what does that say about the durability of American influence globally? Nowhere is this transformation more visible than under the once glowing arches of McDonald's. For decades, the fast food chain was more than a restaurant. It was a national meal, a gathering place, a default option for families, students, and workers alike. But by 2025, those same restaurants are half empty, their red and yellow branding serving as a fading reminder how quickly loyalty can erode. For the first time in decades, McDonald's reported a surprise global sales decline of about 1% in the first quarter of the year. On paper, it looks minor. In context, it was a shockwave for a corporation that prided itself on invulnerability. Analysts were blunt. The Canadian market, once considered a safe bet, had become the first weak link in the chain even McDonald's leadership could not downplay the storm. The CEO admitted that lower-income customers, the very backbone of the brand, were struggling more than ever. Rising costs tied to tariffs on Canadian potash, wheat, and beef had pushed up menu prices. Coca-Cola, perhaps the most iconic beverage brand in the world, once seemed inseparable from Canadian gatherings. Barbecues, birthday parties, late-night meetups, all had their place with the familiar red can. Yet in 2025, Coke's presence began to vanish from supermarket shelves. A 25% tariff on aluminum had raised packaging costs sharply. The company faced an impossible choice: absorb the losses or pass them on to customers. Reports suggested Coca-Cola even considered shifting production toward cheaper plastic bottles in Canada, a move that risked tarnishing its brand image at a time when sustainability was already a pressing concern. Canadians noticed the shift, and their response was decisive. Instead of Coke, shoppers reached for Pepsi, which had long maintained more local production, or for homegrown brands proudly stamped with Product of Canada. What might have seemed a small adjustment in shopping habits carried symbolic weight. Coca-Cola's global empire still dwarfs its Canadian operations, but the country has always been viewed as a crucial testing ground for loyalty. If trust could crumble in Canada, what did that signal for Europe, Asia, or Latin America? For loyal customers who once saw Coke as an affordable indulgence, rising prices and political baggage left a bitter aftertaste. Loyalty, like carbonation, began to fizzle away. But if soft drink showed everyday cracks, the sudden absence of American whiskey carried heavier cultural weight. Jack Daniel's, once a symbol of Southern pride and craftsmanship, abruptly disappeared from Canadian liquor store shelves. The brand, deeply woven into bar culture and household cabinets, had turned overnight into a casualty of political backlash. Even Brown-Forman, the company behind Jack Daniel's, admitted the truth. Its CEO conceded that Canadian retailers removing the product from their shelves had a greater impact than tariffs themselves. The comment revealed a deeper reality. When a brand is no longer welcome, price hikes and trade data matter little. For Canadian consumers, the void was quickly filled. Local brands like Crown Royal and 40 Creek surged, blending quality with a distinctly Canadian identity. What once felt prestigious, the mark of American whiskey, became a stigma. In a boycott climate spreading across industries, drinking Jack Daniel's no longer seemed like indulgence. It felt like disloyalty. A cultural icon had been recast as a cultural liability. Whiskey, once a bridge between Canadian and American traditions, had become a line of division. This erosion of trust was not limited to what people ate or drank. It extended to what they wore. Nike, for decades a near religion among Canadian youth, became the latest symbol of unwelcome American influence. Sneakers that once embodied aspiration, style, and identity suddenly represented politics. Tariffs only sharpened the blow, adding an estimated $1 billion in cost to Nike's supply chain in 2025 alone. On April 4th, the impact became undeniable. The company's market value plummeted by $13 billion in a single day, with shares falling 4%. Investors who had assumed Nike's dominance was untouchable began to question everything done on the streets of Toronto, Vancouver, and Montreal. The cultural shift was visible. Once coveted Jordans and Air Force One sat unsold, while Adidas, Puma, and emerging Canadian brands captured the attention of younger consumers. To buy Nike was no longer just about fashion, it was about making a statement. And more Canadians decided it was not one they wanted to make. The irony was sharp. Just do it, once a slogan of empowerment, now read like a critique. Even giants could stumble when trust evaporated, but if Nike's struggles reflected fashion, Amazon's collapse spoke to the rituals of daily life. For years, click and ship had become part of Canada's household routine. The sight of Amazon boxes at front doors was as common as mail. But by 2025, that ritual was unraveling. It began with small, personal choices. A Montreal resident recounted going a month without ordering from Amazon, choosing instead to buy from local retailers or smaller Canadian platforms. Such acts may have seemed isolated, but in a charged climate of tariffs and patriotism, they spread quickly. Investors were not blind to the trend. Fear of consumer backlash and harsher trade measures wiped out nearly $190 billion in Amazon's market value in May weeks. The company, once the embodiment of resilience and efficiency, suddenly appeared fragile. Meanwhile, Canadian alternatives thrived. Chains and supermarkets once seen as outdated gained renewed relevance as consumers chose local over foreign. The dominance of Made in USA in Canada's digital marketplace had cracked wide open. Walmart's decline, however, was perhaps the most visible of all. Once a family destination for affordability, it became the poster child of rejection. Shopping there was no longer a routine, but a choice many Canadians deliberately avoided. Rivals like Loblaws, Metro, and Sobeys, long overshadowed, surged ahead. Their shelves stocked with Canadian products carried both practical and symbolic weight. Inside Walmart, the reality was bleak. Reduced imports, shortened shifts, shrinking sales. For a company built on scale, shrinking volume spelled disaster. While Walmart struggled, Canadian retailers celebrated double-digit growth. What began as patriotic preference was quickly hardening into cultural habit. The boycott even touched the most ordinary corners of Canadian life: condiments. Heinz ketchup, once a backyard staple, suddenly carried the wrong passport. On barbecues and in diners, Canadians reached for French or President's Choice, proudly marketed as local. Supermarkets leaned into the shift, placing product of Canada tags front and center. Festivals and restaurants followed suit, swapping out Heinz for domestic options. Even ketchup, a symbol of American ubiquity, became political. A bottle of sauce turned into a declaration of loyalty. Taken together, these shifts are about more than food, fashion, or shopping habits. They are about the erosion of America's credibility. For decades, Canada was the safest of safe markets, the neighbor who always bought, always trusted, always consumed. Yet in 2025, that security has dissolved. Canada has shifted from loyal customer to reluctant resistor, and the symbolism cannot be overstated. Losing Canada means more than losing revenue. It means losing the very image of reliability the United States once projected across the globe. Competitors are already stepping into the vacuum. As McDonald's restaurants sit empty in Montreal and Nike sneakers collect dust in Toronto, European, Mexican, and Chinese brands are moving in, eager to seize the gaps. The quiet boycott is no longer just a Canadian story. It is a test case, a preview of how fragile America's dominance might be elsewhere, and the deeper question now hangs in the air. If even America's closest ally has begun to walk away, how long before others follow? Canada's rejection of American brands is not about ketchup, sneakers, or soda alone. It is about trust. It is about who holds credibility in a shifting global economy. What began as a silent boycott has grown into a reshaping of markets and identities, whether temporary or permanent. The change has already altered the story America tells about itself. In the end, the silence in Canadian malls, restaurants, and homes may speak louder than any protest chant.